Labour's pledge on policing and an embarrassing election exchange.
So how much would 10,000 police officers cost?
We believe it'll be about £300,000.
£300,000 for
Sorry,
10,000 police officers? What are you paying them?
Diane Abbott later defended the confusion over the cost of 10,000 extra officers.
Why are you not on top of your brief?
I'm completely on top of my brief. I misspoke this morning. It was the 6th interview out of 7.
Also tonight, the parents of an anorexic teenager say she was let down before her suicide.
A new world record from Paula Radcliffe.
The innocent British athletes whose world records could be erased because of widespread doping in the sport. And the surfer found alive after clinging to his board for more than 30 hours.
This is the ITV Evening News with Ranveer Singh.
Good evening. There was embarrassment and humiliation for Labour's Shadow Home Secretary today after she stumbled over numbers during an agonising interview on police costs. Announcing plans for thousands of new officers for England and Wales, Diane Abbott suggested they would cost a Labour government an average of £30 each. She later told ITV News she'd simply misspoken, but the gaffe was seized upon by her political rivals, as our political correspondent Emily Morgan reports.
They wanted law and order to dominate election coverage today, but Diane Abbott's pledge to put 10,000 more police officers on the streets quickly came unstuck. When asked how much it would cost on LBC this morning, Labour's Shadow Home Secretary floundered.
If we recruit the 10,000 police men and women over a 4-year period, we believe it'll be about £300,000.
£300,000 for
Sorry,
10,000 police officers? What are you paying them?
No, I mean, sorry.
How much will they cost?
They will cost... It will cost about £80 million.
Given another chance to get her figures right, she again appeared confused.
80 million divided by 10,000 equals 8,000. So, what are these police officers going to be paid?
We will be paying them the average...
Has this been thought through?
Of course it's been thought through.
Diane Abbott, would you like to clarify how much it will cost for your policing policy?
From 2021 to 2022, it will cost £300 million a year.
Why did you get the figures so wrong? Why are you not on top of your brief?
I'm completely on top of my brief. I misspoke this morning. It was the 6th interview out of 7.
Are you not embarrassed by this? You want to be the Home Secretary.
I did 7 interviews. 1 I misspoke.
Her leader, Jeremy Corbyn, also denied that one was an embarrassment.
We've corrected the figure and it'll be absolutely clear now, today and in the manifesto. I'm not embarrassed in the slightest.
Diane Abbott wants to work here. As Home Secretary, she says she will reverse the Conservative cuts to forces. 20,000 police officers, she says, have disappeared from our streets since 2010. It's a policy that had left the government having to defend its own record.
We have reduced the number of policemen on the street from 2010, but because the police have been spending that money wisely and because we've worked with them on reform, there's been a reduction in crime of nearly a third since 2010.
All this, though, is being drowned out and questions are now being raised about Labour's own credibility. Emily Morgan, ITV News in Westminster.
Our political editor, Robert Peston, is in Westminster. Robert, clearly an embarrassing gaffe for Labour, or is it actually worse than that, do you think?
Well, look, recruiting a lot more police officers is a policy that would have been, most MPs, Tories and Labour say to me, a popular policy. But of course all of that has been overshadowed by Diane Abbott's gaffe. I've spoken to a large number of Labour MPs. They are mortified, and on the Tory side of the campaign it's brilliant news for them because broadly they just have to shut up shop, which is what they've done today. Let all the focus be on Labour, and with Labour behind in the polls, it's an own goal they can ill afford.
Yeah, well, But you say that, but the Prime Minister herself also still facing questions today over her Brexit bust-up with the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker.
Yeah, out and about in the West Country today, she said that what this showed is that she has to be tough in negotiations with the rest of the EU. I think a bloody difficult woman is how she described herself. And I think there are two important ways of looking at this. Actually, on the doorstep, and again, Tory MPs and Labour MPs say this to me, this has gone down well for her because she is seen as a tough negotiator, and the revelation that this dinner seems to have been difficult simply reinforces in many people's minds the idea that you want a tough negotiator as Prime Minister. There is a separate issue, of course, which is people involved in the negotiations show that this increases the risk of Brexit negotiations collapsing in a way that would damage us. That will be very bad for Britain. Whether that's bad right now for her electoral prospects, I'm afraid, is an altogether different matter.
Robert Peston, thank you. The family of an anorexic schoolgirl who killed herself days after being released from psychiatric care say she was let down. An inquest into the death of 15-year-old Pip McManus said her parents had not been told about the increased risk of suicide after she returned home. Damon Green reports from South Manchester Coroner's Court.
You're not going to smile.
Admitted to hospital, dangerously underweight and even connected to the machines on the ward, Pip McManus can't stop herself from exercising. Her parents released these images, a 13-year-old daughter in the grip of an eating disorder. Less than 2 years later, she'd taken her own life.
I don't think she knew what was going on in her body. It was just...
The anorexia had taken over then. It was just... She was probably 10% Pip, 90% anorexia. Her main concerns were food and exercise. And even in the hospital on the first admission, she was doing star jumps in the toilet. Nobody could stop her.
In the Priory Hospital at 15, but Pip had grown up a happy, loving child in South Manchester until her early teens, when an interest in healthy eating and exercise became an obsession, one her parents say spiralled out of control. She ended up being sectioned and admitted to the specialist mental health facility near her home, but after being released under a community treatment order in December 2015, 5 days later, she was dead. Today, the jury at an inquest concluded that there was inadequate communication to Pip's parents on and prior to discharge of the statistically increased risk of suicide in the first week. After the verdict, her mother struggled to contain her emotions.
Pip spent her last three years fighting against anorexia, malnutrition, depression and self-harm. We believe the failings in our daughter's care from beginning to end resulted in her death.
The family accepts the finding that the Priory was justified in discharging her. They say after years of struggling with her illness, they were hoping she was finally herself.
On her physical appearance, she looked like the Pip we always had. But inside, there was a different person, which could come and go and leave her in a terrible depressed state.
The Priory Hospital says it will consider carefully the findings of the jury, and its heartfelt sympathy is with Pip's family. They are now trying to raise money to improve care for families suffering as they did. Damon Green, ITV News, in Greater Manchester.
A businessman who was shot dead in his home by intruders was described by his family today as caring and compassionate and someone who lived life to the full. Guy Hedger was attacked in the early hours of Sunday morning in front of his partner in Dorset. Juliet Bremner is at the scene tonight. Juliet.
Nearly 3 days after Guy Hedger was confronted by burglars and shot dead in his own home at the end of this lane in what was an exclusive, until recently peaceful area close to Bournemouth, those responsible still haven't been found. Police are today warning that they could still be armed, and they're asking people who are living around here to try and cast their minds back and recall the days leading up to this attack so they can bring them to justice. Detectives believe the people who carried out the brutal attack at this large detached house spent considerable time and effort planning a robbery that went horrifically wrong. 61-year-old Guy Hedger, a marketing executive, and his husband were both inside when the fatal shots were fired. Today, his family said Guy was a caring and compassionate partner, son, brother and uncle who lived life to its full and enriched the lives of all those who knew him. We are devastated that Guy's life has been cut short in this way. Police say that designer watches and jewellery were stolen, but colleagues are struggling to understand why Guy Hedger was killed.
Why anybody would want to target such a lovely, gentle person, I cannot even begin to comprehend.
At least 2 men wearing balaclavas broke into the house at 3 in the morning. Today, officers were working hard to reassure worried neighbours.
I have no recollection of a crime of this nature happening in this part of Dorset before. If you have any concerns at all, please contact Dorset Police.
Sniffer dogs searched the roadside in case those responsible had left clues during a stakeout. But this evening, there had been no arrests. Juliet Bremner, ITV News, Dorset.
Prince William says the decision by a French magazine to publish topless photos of his wife was shocking. In a written statement read to court, the Duke of Cambridge expressed his sadness at the incident 4 years ago when a long lens image of Kate Middleton was published in the magazine Closer. 6 people, including the magazine's editor and 2 photographers, are on trial in Paris in connection with the alleged breach of privacy. Many of athletics' longest-standing world records could be deleted from the history books under new plans to clean up the sport. Only records from 2005 would be recognised, as prior to that, doping cannot be ruled out. But as our sports editor Steve Scott reports, British record holders say it's punishing clean athletes.
Paula Radcliffe's marathon world record has stood for 14 years.
A new world record from Paula Radcliffe.
If it's wiped from history, she believes suspicion is immediately attached to all her achievements.
Unbelievable.
A view echoed by former hurdler Colin Jackson, another who stands to lose his world best.
It really makes me feel quite annoyed when you think that your whole career, really, I feel now, is under suspicion. Because if they're taking away a time, a performance, it means that every single thing that I've done has got to be tarnished exactly the same way.
In the Olympics alone, 30 records are at risk, but many more at other events, both in and outdoors, could be stripped too, including Jarmila Kratochvilova, whose 800-metre world record has stood for 34 years. Under the proposals, a world record counts if it is set at an internationally approved competition, if the athlete has had consistent doping tests prior to the event, and if their sample taken at the time is stored for 10 years. The man behind the idea accepts some clean athletes will be hurt, but told me today he wants them to consider the sport's much bigger crisis.
I would first of all apologise. I think it's no way intended to besmirch their reputation, but I would also ask them to look at it in the cold light of day. The sport needs to take some radical steps to regain the trust of the public, and this is one of a number of steps which the sport will take.
Jonathan Edwards has described the proposals as cowardly, believing his efforts should be treasured, not sacrificed. There's no escaping the feeling from many former British stars the cheats have won all over again. Steve Scott, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, 2 remarkable rescues. The surfer found after more than 30 hours at sea on the heroes who saved him. And the passers-by who rescued 2 young children from an overturned car in floodwater. Those stories and more after the break. Welcome back. A surfer who survived after being missing at sea for more than 30 hours has described his rescuers as heroes. 22-year-old Matthew Bryce disappeared on Sunday morning off the Argyll coast in Scotland. He was spotted last night by the Coast Guard in the Irish Sea and is now recovering in hospital. Our Scotland correspondent Peter Smith reports on his lucky escape.
This is the dramatic moment a missing surfer was found adrift in the Irish Sea. Light was fading and the Coast Guard was just about to call off the search, even preparing to tell the surfer's family, when the call suddenly came from the Prestwick Search and Rescue helicopter. "We've got him." Matthew Bryce escaped with only mild hypothermia. His survival story stunned and delighted those who were looking for him. Today, the pilot of that against-the-odds mission was back at base with his helicopter. On board, he talked me through the rescue.
We're always seeing things floating on the water. There's flotsam all over the place, so it could be anything. So you go and have a look at it. No, it's just a seal, or it's just a piece of garbage. But when you then actually go and see and realise it's a surfboard, and more importantly, there's someone waving at you from it, it's brilliant. Best feeling in the world.
Matthew was last seen at 9 a.m. on Sunday en route to Machrihanish Bay, a popular surf spot in Argyll. When he didn't return, the alarm was raised and rescue teams from both sides of the Irish Sea were dispatched. At 7:30 last night, after 32 hours at sea, Matthew was spotted by the Prestwick Search and Rescue helicopter, 13 miles off the coast. He was taken to Belfast and in a statement said, "I am so grateful that I'm now receiving treatment in hospital. I cannot thank those enough who rescued and cared for me. They are all heroes." Matthew owes his life to the rescue teams as well as his surfboard and a thick winter wetsuit. As a dedicated surfer, he had some more good news today. A lifeboat found his discarded board and it's still in one piece, though it may be some time before he chooses to return with it to the water. Peter Smith, ITV News, Prestwick.
A search is underway in France for the remains of a teacher who disappeared during Northern Ireland's Troubles. Seamus Ruddy was abducted from Paris in 1985 by the INLA and then murdered. For years, the location of his body remained a secret, but it's now thought he may be in a forest near Rouen. Former Chancellor George Osborne started his job as editor of London's Evening Standard today. His first edition includes criticism of Theresa May's handling of Brexit, calling her to give more details of her plans. And the government says it will not appeal a High Court decision which forces it to publish plans to tackle illegal air pollution. Its lawyers claimed it would be politically damaging ahead of an election, but it will now publish the proposals by next week. Hundreds of patients are being contacted and offered a blood test after they were treated by a doctor with HIV. It affects those who were treated at the Chesterfield, Royal Cornwall and Nottingham Universities trusts. Ben Chapman is outside the Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham tonight. Ben, what have the authorities told you?
Well, they say this locum doctor, who has not been named, was diagnosed with HIV last year, 6 years after their last negative test. And so because their HIV status was unknown for that 6-year period, patients who had what have been described as invasive procedures with a risk of infection by that doctor are now being recalled. Now, it affects 401 patients in total who are now being invited back for a blood test. They were treated at 3 different hospital trusts. They are Chesterfield Royal Hospital, Nottingham University Hospitals and Cornwall Royal Hospital, and they were all treated between June 2010 and February 2015. Now, the authorities here say that it's just a precaution, that the risk of the virus being transmitted from doctor to patient is extremely low. We're told the doctor no longer works for the NHS and has had restrictions placed on their practice. We're also told that an interim suspension order was placed on them earlier this year after they failed to comply with those conditions.
Ben Chapman, thank you. And finally tonight, the emotional reunion of a Texas couple and the Good Samaritans who saved them and their babies' lives. Philip and Emily Ochiltree's car overturned in a flooded river, trapping the family inside. With time running out, locals pitched in to help, and thankfully there was a happy ending, as Rebecca Barry explains.
In the back seat of this overturned car, a baby and a toddler are trapped. Their parents, stuck in the front seats, are desperately trying to get to them, but can't. So strangers come to the rescue.
Give me the baby! Give me the baby! Give me the baby! I need help!
A baby boy, unconscious but alive, is pulled from the water. His sister, also freed, still buckled into her car seat.
That's the only thing I was worried about, getting my kids out of this vehicle with water in it. It was awful. It's not an image I can get out of my head, seeing my son's little legs dangling blue and purple when they pulled him out.
The family were trying to escape as tornadoes hit Texas, but they got caught in the floods.
Not being able to fight my way underneath the seats, I was helpless. And I beat myself up over that because I mean, I am their hand. I am their protector.
Thank you so much.
And today they met one of the men who helped save their children's lives.
Thank you so much for being there, for stopping and risking your lives to jump in and save ours. You did something that not many people would do.
18-month-old Addison and 4-month-old Marshall are now recovering in hospital. Alive thanks to the strangers who stepped in. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
That's all for now. Tom Bradby will be here with the news at 10. But from everyone here on the evening team, bye-bye.